Last month, the nation paused to commemorate the second anniversary of the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. And now parents rallying together to file a second lawsuit in connection with the tragedy. The suit seeking monetary damages against the school system and the town on behalf of the estates of Noah Posner and Jesse Lewis, two of the children that were killed on that day. The wrongful death suit says security at the school was lax. Suit also says the town failed to provide the school with a secure front entrance and classroom doors that could be locked from the inside. The suit seeks an unspecified amount of damages. I'll get to the second suit in a second. Doug, when you have cases, and you've obviously represented cases where you have multiple clients, but two of the 20 children are bringing the case. What's the significance from a legal standpoint that 18 aren't?
None. There's no significance there. There could be suits next week that the rest of them could file. So you can't look at that. I mean, you'd have to look at these specific suits and what they're claiming. Sometimes there are suits that go in progression. Somebody will lose and another person will lose, and then finally a theory of the case will be developed. That happens all the time in litigation, but I wouldn't read into it at all.
You know, Jimmy, this is the second suit. I'll talk in a little bit about where they're suing the gun manufacturer, but to the average person, they stand back without knowing all the details of the case. The school district and the town, when you're talking about an elementary school prior to Newtown, as a parent, it wasn't on my radar here that I needed to worry when I walked in my kid's classroom to look if they could lock it from the inside, or even though they did have some security at the front, that I needed to have a law enforcement presence or whatever in the front. How does somebody figure out, the court or the jury or whatever, what the standard should be, what the rightful expectation of, in this case, security should be, again, putting one in the mindset of more than 2 years ago before this tragedy happened?
I suppose that, what is reasonable is a moving target, pardon the pun, but I don't see it. I don't see, and I don't think even after the events of the last few years, that we can expect our elementary schools to have bulletproof windows and so on. I mean, if it was a situation where they knew that somebody was dangerous and he had been identified and they had let him in anyway without the means or ability to keep him out, that's one thing. But if what they're saying is that schools now need to be equipped with, again, the bulletproof windows and so on and so forth, I don't see it. I don't think it's reasonable. And so what if you could lock the doors? There are reasons that the doors can't be locked because you've got small children in the school. Would it have stopped the maniac from
And we do know, it's just a point of fact that he did shoot through a door when he entered. I want to get to the second suit, which I thought, and I'm not saying this does or doesn't have merit, the first one, but this one certainly resonated with me at the time, and it has to do with that second suit with the Newtown parents filed against the makers of Bushmaster. That's the manufacturer of the assault rifle that was used in this, the weapon that took 26 lives, including 20 children and those 6 heroic teachers at the school. Now, the plaintiffs wrote that the Bushmaster AR-15 rifle should not have been sold publicly because it was designed for military use and is unsuited for hunting or home defense. In order to continue profiting from the sale of AR-15s, defendants chose to disregard the unreasonable risks the rifle posed outside of specialized, highly regulated institutions like the armed forces and law enforcement. Now, this gun lawsuit is going to test a federal law that's designed to protect gun companies. By the way, it's exclusive to gun manufacturers, with an exemption, that usually you'll only see in certain other cases called negligent entrustment. But let me come back to, this sounds like it makes sense, but this doesn't have any chance of going anywhere here because you have to now apply a negligence standard to gun manufacturers that's never been able to hold up.
Well, I think it has a very small chance of success, and I think that when you look at the gun does exactly what it was designed to do. It's just not in the hands of the people that it was contemplated to be in the hands of. But that's not the fault of the gun manufacturer. That's the fault of your local legislator in terms of state legislation and also federal legislators. Because you may have a strong gun policy, strong gun laws in your particular state. If that gun's coming in from your neighboring state, you're still at risk. You can't reasonably expect a school to become a fortress, but at the same time, you would expect that our legislators do not foster an atmosphere where people can walk around with military-style weapons that can be as effective as if they were on a battlefield, but yet you're on the street. And another point is that law enforcement doesn't have these weapons. So quite often, law enforcement itself would be outgunned if somebody comes at them with an AK-47.
It just does seem, though, that whether it be manufacturers or distributors, that there's no accountability. They can produce and they can sell, and you know what? As long as they show even an attempt of bookkeeping here, then it's not their problem what happens with what they're selling out there in the public. And it is unique, it does seem, the protections that are afforded to this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mayo as well. I don't see how this suit can possibly survive very long in the system, in the court system. I mean, if it's a weapon that's sold legally, that's the capitalist system, and people will continue to sell them, and stores will continue to buy them and sell them to the public, to people who shouldn't be in the hands of it. But I don't see the suits against either against the school either, because when you first saw the tragedy at Sandy Hook, and you saw that school, I mean, everybody who lives in the suburbs in this area, it looks just like every elementary school in a town. And when you think of bulletproof glass at a school, you think at a high school after Columbine and all of the high school tragedies. The older kids, you don't think of it in terms of at an elementary school. And doors locking from the inside, that I think has its own dangers with children that young as
Richard,
well.
very quickly, if I can, though, we did have a 9/11 fund. No basis in law for that. Okay, that was because people felt it was the right thing to do because of the situation. Why is it that there's not a fund, perhaps, for the children, for the families, lost kids at Sandy Hook?
And I can tell you what I've heard anecdotally is from some that families that weren't directly impacted, that didn't lose a child that day, some others have claimed trauma, real or imagined, whatever, and through United Way funds or whatever, have gained access to it when some of the families directly impacted haven't. And I think there's a lot of resentment in certain quarters about this. But then there's also, if you ask why haven't every family attached their name to this, some of the ugly attacks online and elsewhere through some of the gun right groups, at any of the families that have echoed concern, that have gone to Capitol Hill, that have gone to Hartford, or wherever the case may be to talk about lax gun laws, the pushback that they have gotten and personally targeting them, mentioning families, et cetera, has been such to dissuade some of these folks. It's one of the parts of this story that hadn't really been talked about, but it's just so awful if you think about it, what they had to go through. And now, because they're speaking up, and some of the folks who I'll editorialize gutlessly have gone after them, has been a shame. All right. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, some high-profile cases. I'm going to ask the table about where we go from here. Stay with us.